A billionaire CEO known for his power and pride once fired a pregnant maid without a second thought. 10 years later, on a rainy evening at a charity event in San Francisco, he stopped in his tracks. A little boy was standing on the street, helping an old woman cross the road, his eyes shining with a familiar kindness. The crowd clapped, cameras flashed, but the billionaire froze. Something in that boy's face hit him harder than any business loss or betrayal ever could. His heart raced, his hands shook, and a single name escaped his lips. A name he thought he'd buried forever. Grace. And in that moment, the man who ruled empires realized his past was standing right in front of him. Ethan Cole was the kind of man who owned everything: glass towers, sleek cars, and headlines. At 42, he was one of America's youngest billionaire CEOs, the face of innovation, the symbol of control. But behind the cameras, behind the expensive suit and the sharp smile, he lived alone in a Pacific Heights mansion that echoed with silence. Every morning, his housekeeper laid out his breakfast for one. The coffee stayed hot, untouched, while he stared out over the San Francisco Bay, calm on the surface, storm underneath. His world was built on logic, not love. Efficiency, not emotion. That was how he had survived. Across the bridge, in a small apartment in Oakland, another world woke up. Grace Miller, once a maid in that same mansion, now lived with her 10-year-old son, Noah. The walls were thin, the kitchen small, but laughter filled it every morning. Grace packed Noah's lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a small handwritten note. Be kind, no matter what. Noah didn't know much about his father. Grace had never told him. She'd only say, he was someone from another life. But sometimes, when she watched Noah reading by the window, the sunlight tracing his hair, her eyes glistened. He had Ethan's eyes. 10 years earlier, she had worked as a maid at Ethan's mansion, loyal, quiet, hard-working. She had cleaned his rooms, polished his floors, and smiled through exhaustion. When she found out she was pregnant, she gathered the courage to tell him. But Ethan, drowning in company scandals and lawsuits, saw her only as a risk. Without a word of warmth, he signed her termination paper. One signature, and her world fell apart. That night she stood outside the mansion gates, clutching a small suitcase and a growing belly. The city lights blurred with tears, and the rain mixed with her sobs. She had begged for one more month, but Ethan Cole never looked back. Years passed. Grace worked double shifts at a local diner and later at a community clinic, raising Noah on kindness, not bitterness. She never taught him to hate the man who left them behind. She taught him to forgive. But forgiveness, as she learned, doesn't erase pain. It only hides it deep enough to survive. And that morning, as Noah packed his old backpack for school, Grace noticed a small tear at the corner. "I'll fix it tonight," she said softly. "You just focus on your big day." He smiled and hugged her. "Mom, I'll make you proud." Across the bay, in his mansion, Ethan stared at a newspaper headline. Community Clinic celebrates 10 years. Small acts of kindness changing lives. A faded photo beneath the article caught his eye. A familiar smile. A face from a decade ago. His hand froze. The coffee cup slipped from his grasp and shattered on the marble floor, and for the first time in 10 years, Ethan Cole felt something he couldn't explain: fear. The next weekend, the city gathered for a charity run at Golden Gate Park, an event sponsored by Cole Industries. Ethan arrived late, dressed in his usual black tracksuit, his assistant and security close behind. The cameras followed him as he smiled for the press, but his mind was somewhere else, on that old photo in the newspaper. At the hydration booth stood Noah, holding out paper cups to tired runners. His eyes were full of energy, his voice bright. He wasn't there for fame. He was volunteering for the same clinic that had helped his mother years ago. When Ethan reached for a drink, their eyes met. For a moment, time paused. There it was again, that face. The same gentle smile, the same spark. Something inside Ethan trembled. "You okay, sir?" Noah asked, noticing his heavy breathing. Ethan nodded awkwardly. "Just need a minute?" Noah quickly stepped forward, guiding him to a bench. Breathe slow, in through your nose, out through your mouth. My mom taught me. She works at the clinic. Ethan followed his instructions, confused and curious. The boy's calm tone, his caring eyes, they stirred something Ethan hadn't felt in years. Your mom sounds smart, he said, catching his breath. Noah smiled. She is. She says kindness is worth more than money. Ethan stared at him. Those words hit like lightning. That phrase, he had heard it before, once in his kitchen years ago, from a young maid who stood up to him the day she was fired. The voice of Grace Miller echoed in his head. Kindness lasts longer than power. Ethan's heart began to pound. What's your name, son? Noah, the boy said proudly. Noah Miller, Ethan froze. The world seemed to go silent around him. He didn't respond right away. His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. Miller. That name. He hid his reaction behind a weak smile. That's a good name. A volunteer called Noah to help at another station. He waved goodbye, running off with a laugh that felt painfully familiar. Ethan watched him disappear through the crowd, his chest heavy with something he couldn't name. Sir, said Linda, his longtime house manager, approaching quietly. She had seen it all. The boy, Ethan's face, the fear in his eyes. Ethan turned toward her, trying to steady himself. Do you know that kid? Linda hesitated. Not exactly. But his mother's name sounds familiar. He glared. How familiar? She sighed. You should sit down before I answer that. He didn't. His voice dropped low, almost trembling. Say it. Linda looked away, guilt shadowing her face. Grace Miller. She used to work for you. Ethan's body went cold. The sound of the crowd faded. The laughter, the music, all of it vanished under the weight of that name. And then Linda whispered the final blow, her eyes filled with regret. Ethan, that boy is her son. He turned toward the crowd where Noah had vanished, but the boy was gone. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his dim office, staring at the photo again, the clinic staff smiling, arms linked. In the corner stood Grace, her expression softer, older, and next to her Noah. He zoomed in on the image, his reflection staring back from the laptop screen. That same look in the boy's eyes, quiet strength. Grace's strength. For the first time in years, Ethan felt regret claw at him. He wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep down, he already knew. The next morning he asked Marcus, his head of security, to find out everything about Grace Miller. Marcus returned hours later with a folder. She's clean, he said flatly. Single mom, works 2 jobs, lives in a small apartment in Oakland. No scandals, no lawsuits. Ethan flipped through the pages, clinic reports, volunteer photos, Noah's school achievements. Then one line made his hand stop trembling. Father, unknown. Marcus leaned closer. You really think that kid's yours? Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't know, Marcus shrugged. If you want my advice, stay away. These stories never end well. You're a public figure. They might see dollar signs. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Or maybe they see something real. Later that week, Linda visited Grace's clinic under the excuse of donating old medical supplies. She watched Grace comfort a frightened patient, her voice steady and kind. Grace had aged, but her warmth was untouched. When she stepped outside, Linda caught her breath and whispered, Grace Miller. After all these years, that evening as Grace was closing up, she found a black car parked outside the clinic. The tinted window rolled down slowly. Ethan sat inside, her breath caught. Ethan? He stepped out, unsure, awkward, a billionaire standing on cracked pavement. Grace, he said quietly, I needed to see you. The streetlights flickered in the fog. For a moment, neither spoke. The city hummed around them, but it felt like the world had stopped. You shouldn't be here, Grace finally said. This part of the city doesn't welcome your kind of people. I'm not here as a CEO, Ethan replied, voice low. I just want to talk. She shook her head. Now you want to talk? After 10 years? Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't know, Grace. I didn't know you had a child. Her eyes glistened. You didn't care to know. He stood there, unable to argue, every word of hers cutting deep. Before he could say another word, Noah's voice echoed from the doorway. Mom, are you okay? Ethan turned. and Noah's innocent face appeared in the glow of the streetlight, the same eyes that had haunted him all week. Grace immediately stepped protectively in front of her son. "Noah, go inside." But Noah hesitated, looking between them, confused. Mom, who is he?" The silence stretched heavy. Grace opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, a voice broke through the tension. "Mr. Cole, we need to leave," Marcus called from the car, stepping out. "This area isn't safe." Ethan turned, torn between fear and guilt. Grace's hand trembled as she whispered, "Don't you dare walk away again." He hesitated, one step toward her, one back toward the car. The headlights flashed across their faces, cold and blinding. When the light faded, Ethan was gone. Grace stood frozen on the sidewalk, rain starting to fall, her son clutching her sleeve. And from across the street, a dark figure watched them through the shadows, Linda, holding a small envelope close to her chest. Inside it was a birth certificate, and on it, the father's name wasn't blank anymore. 3 days later, the rain returned, the kind that wrapped the whole city in silver fog. Grace hadn't seen Ethan since that night, but she couldn't shake the way he'd looked at Noah, not with anger, with heartbreak. That morning, Noah came home from school, clutching an envelope. "Mom, this was in my backpack." "No name, just this." Grace opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. No signature, only 6 words. "Please come to the mansion tonight." Her heart pounded. It couldn't be. 10 years since she'd been inside those walls, 10 years since her world had fallen apart there. She almost tore the note apart, but Noah's hopeful eyes stopped her. "Maybe it's important," he said quietly. That evening she took the bus through the storm. Noah stayed with a neighbor, unaware of the decision his mother was about to face. When Grace arrived, the gates of the Cole mansion stood open, water running down the stone like tears. Linda greeted her at the door, nervous but gentle. "He's waiting in the main hall," she said softly. Inside, the house looked the same, spotless, cold, perfect. Grace's footsteps echoed as she walked across the marble floor. Then she saw him. Ethan stood near the fireplace, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired but determined. "Grace," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. She didn't answer. She stood still, dripping rain onto his perfect floor. "I found out the truth," he said. "About Noah, about the way things ended. I was wrong." Her arms folded across her chest. "That's 10 years too late." "I didn't know," he said desperately. "Marcus never gave me your letter. He told me you quit. He said you wanted a settlement and disappeared." Grace froze. "What letter?" He pointed to the table. There it was, her old envelope, yellowed, still sealed. Linda whispered, "I found it last week in the archives." It was hidden. Grace's hand shook as she tore it open. Inside, her own handwriting stared back at her. "I'm expecting and I don't want anything from you, except my job. Please, let me stay until I can stand on my own." Ethan looked away, guilt swallowing his words. "I ruined your life without even knowing." Tears welled in Grace's eyes. "You didn't ruin it. You just made me stronger." The thunder outside cracked, shaking the windows. Ethan took a step closer. "Grace, I can fix this. I can help Noah. I can—" She stopped him with a look. "He doesn't need your money. He needs a father who shows up. Can you be that?" Ethan's eyes filled. "I can try." Before she could reply, the heavy front doors burst open. Marcus stormed in, soaked, furious. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted. "You're putting everything at risk for a maid and her kid?" Ethan turned coldly. "Get out!" But Marcus stepped forward, voice sharp. "You think she came here for love? She came here for your name, your money." Grace slapped him. The sound cracked like thunder. Everyone froze. Marcus's glare darkened. "You'll regret that." He threw something on the floor, a photo of Grace and Noah outside the clinic with the word "exposed" stamped across it. "By tomorrow," Marcus hissed, "the world will know your secret." The lightning outside flashed. Ethan's fists clenched. Grace's face went pale, and in that single blinding moment, the mansion lights went out. Darkness swallowed the mansion. For a few seconds, only the thunder spoke. Then a single emergency light flickered to life, painting the room in a pale red glow. Grace stood frozen, her breath shallow. Ethan turned slowly toward Marcus, whose silhouette loomed near the door. "What did you do?" Ethan's voice was low but dangerous. Marcus smirked. You think people won't talk, Ethan? You the great billionaire CEO, hiding a maid's child all these years? Once this story breaks, everything you've built will burn. Ethan stepped forward, his anger simmering. Everything I've built means nothing if it costs someone's life. Marcus laughed bitterly. You've gone soft, but Grace's trembling voice cut through the tension. Enough! You've already taken enough from us. Marcus turned toward her, his tone dripping with contempt. You should have stayed in your place. Maybe I did, Grace shot back. Oh, but you lost yours the day you buried that letter. The words hit him like a strike. His jaw tightened. He stepped closer, raising his hand. Ethan grabbed his wrist before it could land. Touch her again, and I'll make sure you never work anywhere again. For a tense second, neither man moved. Then Marcus ripped his arm free and stormed out into the storm, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Rain beat against the glass walls as Ethan sank onto the couch, the weight of 10 years pressing down on him. Grace stood near the window, tears streaking down her face. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. I was blind, she shook her head. Sorry doesn't change the past, but maybe it can shape the future. Before he could respond, Noah's voice echoed from the foyer. Mom! Both turned in shock. Noah was standing at the door, soaked, shivering, clutching his small inhaler. I came because I was scared. The news. It said your name, Mom. Ethan rushed to him, helping him breathe, panic flashing in his eyes. He's wheezing. Where's his medication? Grace fumbled through her bag, but the inhaler was empty. I thought it was full. Ethan didn't hesitate. He scooped Noah into his arms. There's a hospital 15 minutes away. Linda appeared, already grabbing the car keys. I'll drive. They raced through the storm, windshield wipers beating like a heartbeat. Grace holding Noah's hand in the back seat, whispering prayers. Noah's breathing grew shallow. Mom, it hurts. Stay with me, baby, she cried. Ethan looked at him through the rearview mirror, his vision blurring. He'd signed million-dollar deals, faced ruthless rivals, but nothing had ever terrified him like the thought of losing this boy. They burst into the community clinic, Grace's second home. Doctors rushed to help, nurses recognizing her immediately. Noah was taken inside, Grace following close behind. Ethan stood outside the room, drenched, his heart pounding. He could hear machines' voices panic and Grace's quiet sobs. Then, through the glass, Noah's small hand lifted weakly, pointing toward Ethan. Tell him, he whispered faintly. I forgive him. Ethan's breath caught, his body trembling. The words pierced deeper than any punishment could. The doctor turned. We need more oxygen now. The alarms began to sound. Grace screamed his name. Ethan pushed through the door, and then the monitor flatlined. The flatline echoed through the small clinic room, cutting through the storm outside. Grace's scream tore through the silence. Noah! Ethan stood frozen, his heart shattering. In that single endless moment, he realized that all the power, all the wealth, all the billionaire pride meant nothing if it couldn't save one small boy. Doctors swarmed around Noah. Seconds felt like hours. Then a soft gasp. A flicker on the monitor, the faintest heartbeat. Grace collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, God. Thank you. The doctor looked up, smiling faintly. He's stable. The boy's a fighter. Ethan stumbled back against the wall, shaking, breathless. His whole body trembled, relief flooding through him. Linda placed a hand on his shoulder. You got your second chance, Ethan. Don't waste it. Hours passed. The storm faded into dawn. Noah slept peacefully, his breathing steady, Grace's hand wrapped around his. Ethan sat quietly in the corner, unable to look away from them. A picture of everything he had lost, and everything he could still make right. When morning came, Grace opened her eyes and whispered, He'll be okay now. Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. He's stronger than I ever was, she smiled softly. He's strong because he had to be. He hesitated, then spoke. Grace, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to take care of both of you, not as payment, as family. Her eyes filled, but she didn't answer. She looked at Noah instead, who stirred awake, blinking at the sunlight streaming through the window. "Hey, champ," Ethan said gently. "You scared us," Noah smiled weakly. "Mom says the world gives second chances if you're kind." Ethan swallowed hard. "Your mom's right. The next few days changed everything." Ethan cancelled meetings, shut down his calendar, and stayed by their side. The story of the billionaire and the boy leaked online, but instead of a scandal, it became a miracle story. Headlines read, "Billionaire CEO funds Oakland clinic after emotional reunion." But for Ethan, it wasn't about redemption in the media. It was about redemption in his heart. He quietly paid for the clinic's expansion, adding a children's wing in Grace's name. No press, no cameras, just an engraved plaque that read, "Kindness is stronger than power." Grace returned to work at the clinic, this time as a coordinator, helping other struggling mothers. Noah recovered fully, becoming a symbol of hope for everyone who walked through those doors. 1 year later, the three of them stood together at the opening of the new wing. Balloons swayed in the breeze. The city skyline glowed behind them. Linda handed Ethan a small box. "He left this in my office 10 years ago," she said. "Said he'd never use it again." Inside lay Ethan's engraved silver pen, the same one Noah had picked up the night they first met. Ethan knelt and handed it to Noah. "This belongs to you. Now." Noah looked at him curiously. "What should I do with it?" "Write your own story," Ethan said softly. "And make it kinder than mine." Grace watched them, tears in her eyes, the past finally loosening its grip. As the crowd clapped, Ethan looked at her and whispered, "I never deserved forgiveness." Grace shook her head. "Forgiveness isn't earned, Ethan, it's given. The only question is what you do with it." Later that evening, they walked together along Pier 7, where it had all started. The lights reflecting on the calm bay, the city breathing quietly around them. Noah ran ahead, laughing, the rescued dog from the first scene bounding beside him. Ethan and Grace stopped at the edge of the pier, the cool wind brushing past. She turned to him. "You built empires, Ethan, but tonight, you built something real." He smiled, a quiet, genuine smile. "A home?" She nodded. "Yes, a home." The camera would fade out on their silhouettes, three figures standing under the golden sky, the sound of waves mixing with laughter. A single line would appear on screen. "Sometimes, the richest people are the ones who learn how to give love back." And in the distance, the boy's voice echoed, "Mom, Dad, hurry! The sun's coming up!" For the first time in years, Ethan looked toward the horizon and smiled through his tears.